The next verse, 512, is thematically linked to the previous verse, which I covered in the previous video, so it might be worth checking that one out if you haven't done so. We've got a run of verses here which are contrasting the two poles of enlightenment practice, what we could call the poles of ignorance and wisdom, or ignorance and realization. In enlightenment practice, we're constantly shifting between the two, hopefully more and more in the direction of realization. But awakening does not exclude the possibility of falling asleep again. You might have some hypothetical idea that awakening is permanent. That's up to you. Perhaps you're right, but I can only go from what I know personally, and it seems to me that the way consciousness operates is it awakens and it falls asleep. This is the nature of consciousness. Awakening in itself is a permanent thing. We can always awaken. There is always the possibility of awakening. So in that sense it's permanent. But on a practical reality level, all experience indicates that consciousness falls asleep. Just look at the world. The world consists of consciousness asleep. There is always the possibility, though, of awakening. But there's always the possibility of falling back asleep. So this is why I say there's no such thing as enlightenment. There's only enlightenment practice. And it's very much in the spirit of this that we can understand this next verse and the verses that follow after it. The previous verse, 511, finished by telling us that the essence of being, the being which is realized by the wise, is not obtainable. And we've got a certain repetition here. Verse 512, the unobtainable essence is indeed unborn, and yet it is nowhere separated from causation, nor are things as they are for this moment anywhere separated from causation. So this unobtainable essence is indeed unborn. We were told in the previous verse that it's primarily unborn and yet born. When we realize it, when we step into it, when we step into this awareness, this being, we see that we cannot apply any predicates to it, any descriptions of it, any descriptions to it. We can't even say that it exists, that it's real. It's something that never came into existence. And the previous verse made a point of saying that it's not united with causation. It's quite separate from the world of causation. This is the world of conventional reality. This is the world of consciousness asleep, the world of ignorance. It's quite separate from that. And yet we're told here that it is nowhere separated from causation. Because without this awareness, none of this world would exist. That's actually incredibly obvious. You can tell how much you're identifying with conventional existence, conventional understanding, by the weight that you give to hypothesis. You probably don't even realize it. You probably take your hypotheses as real. You don't realize that they're hypotheses. If there is no awareness, then nothing would exist. But you might have some idea of a universe, a big empty universe, with no life forms in it. That's a hypothetical possibility and could be real. No, it can't. It can't be real. It's only real because you're hypothesizing it. You're putting yourself out of the picture. We have the habit of constructing realities which put ourselves out of the picture. You're not in touch then with the immediacy of awareness. A hypothesis is a construction of your own mind. It is not a reality. Now I can sense all sorts of objections to this argument, but I can't think of any objection which is actually invalid. It's just a prejudice, something we don't want to let go of. And that's because we're not in touch with the immediacy of awareness. It's only because we're aware that we can say this world exists. We can hypothesize an earth without human beings. Again, that has no meaning. That has no meaning whatsoever. Except to demonstrate the power of awareness once again, and being able to construct such hypotheses. Much of our reality consists of hypotheses, ideas, memories, hopes. We think back to the past, we think to the future, we think to possible futures. We have ideas about the world. All of this is mental activity. It is all mental activity, and it takes us away from this unobtainable essence which is unborn. And yet nowhere separated from causation, because all of that mental activity is only there because we're aware of it. Everything is only here or there because we're aware of it. So you might say to me, well, there's something. If you're not aware of something, does that mean it doesn't exist? Yes. So you can't see the moon right now. Does that mean it doesn't exist? Correct. The moon is at this moment a memory, a construction, an idea. When we direct our attention to the moon, that is when it exists. And then you might argue, well, what keeps the tides in place? Well, do the tides exist? Well, I might be sitting watching the tide, watching the sea. The moon's not apparent. And we've got this story that the moon holds the sea in place. The moon and the gravity of the earth hold the sea in place. Well, this is a fine story, and within its own context we can talk in terms of this story. But it has no relevance to immediate awareness. We can appreciate the story and use that story like we might use a map to achieve certain goals. But that's on a particular level of reality, of conventional understanding. What we need to do is come back to this immediacy, the immediacy of awareness, and stop relating to ideas, to memories, to hypotheses. Nothing wrong with that in a certain context, but we must be aware that that's what we're doing. The whole universe exists right here. And for me, right here, right now, that universe consists of 4 walls, a ceiling, a window with slightly open curtains, various feelings. And at the moment, rather than get caught up in that, because for me, right here, right now, this is what my awareness is holding, I can drop back from what it's holding to awareness itself. So what I'm aware of is the world of causation. And because there's nothing here to hijack my attention particularly, I can bring the attention back to itself. Let the attention be at rest. And when it's at rest, this is the realization of awareness. So causation, the world as we conventionally understand it, when it's not sucking us in, it's a reminder to practice. This is what is referred to in previous verses as the Maya-like samadhi. Samadhi is realization. It's what we can abide in. We can abide in this. We can abide in this still equanimity, where the attention isn't being hijacked. We've recognized ideas, hypotheses, memories, daydreams for the flimsy structures, the flimsy constructions that they are. And so we come back. We come back to this completeness, this bigness. We come back to being, what was described in the previous verse as the being which is realized by the wise.